A polished woman, her gaze steady and sharp, is yanked from the first-class boarding line by a security officer, radiating contempt. He sneers at her $4,000 laptop and her calm demeanor, seeing only a threat, a fraud who doesn't belong. He throws her into a sterile glass room, ripping her bag apart, unaware of the document hidden inside. It's not a weapon. It's a contract. It's the $8.4 billion agreement that keeps his own employer's planes in the sky, and she's the one who signs it. He just made the biggest mistake of his career. The air in John F. Kennedy International Airport's Terminal 4 was a familiar purgatory. It tasted of recycled oxygen, industrial floor wax, and the faint, sugary tang of Cinnabon from a concourse over. For Ava Williams, it was just another Tuesday. It was the sterile link between her New York high-rise and her next meeting in Geneva. She stood in the priority boarding line for Global Airways Flight 112, a non-stop to Switzerland. The line was a quiet mix of bespoke suits and understated old money. Ava, in her charcoal grey Loro Piana cashmere trousers and a simple silk blouse, blended seamlessly, yet stood apart. Her hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant bun, and her only jewelry was a simple platinum watch. She held a single, black leather carry-on. No fuss. No excess. She was the very picture of efficient, anonymous wealth. That apparently was the problem. She felt the stare before she saw the man. It was a heavy, judgmental weight that settled between her shoulder blades. She turned her head slightly. He was a TSA officer, but he wore the slightly different uniform of a specialized screening unit. His name tag read, M. Thompson. He was a man of medium height, thick in the chest, with a face that seemed perpetually locked in a state of sour suspicion. He wasn't looking at the family fumbling with their passports, or the banker loudly complaining into his phone. He was looking at her, his eyes raked over her, from her expensive, practical shoes to her face. It wasn't a standard security sweep. It was an assessment. It was a calculation. Ava knew the look. She had seen it in boardrooms when she presented quarterly earnings, and she had seen it in high-end restaurants where the hostess paused just a second too long. It was the look that said, "You don't belong here." Ava held his gaze. She didn't smile, nor did she flinch. She simply met his eyes with the same cool, appraising look she gave a volatile fuel commodities report. This, she found, often angered men like him more than any protest could. Thompson's lip curled in a barely perceptible sneer. He gestured to his partner, a younger woman named Sarah Jenkins, and murmured something. Jenkins glanced at Ava and looked away quickly, her expression nervous. The boarding agent called for first class. Ava stepped forward, handing over her passport and boarding pass. "Good morning, Miss Williams," the agent smiled. "Seat 1A. Enjoy your flight." "Thank you," Ava said, her voice low and clear. She took 2 steps toward the jet bridge when the voice cut through the air. "Ma'am, hold it right there." Ava stopped. She turned slowly. Officer Thompson was approaching her, his partner trailing reluctantly behind. "Madame," he said again, drawing the word out. "We're going to need you to come with us. You've been selected for a random secondary security screening." Ava looked at the half-empty jet bridge. She looked at the other first-class passengers streaming past, none of whom were randomly selected. "Officer," she said, her voice perfectly level, "my flight is boarding. I was already cleared at the main checkpoint." "And now you're being cleared again," Thompson said. His hand hovered near his belt. It was an absurdly theatrical gesture of authority. "This way. Now." He wasn't asking. He was commanding. Ava felt the familiar, hot pulse of adrenaline, the weary anger that she had learned to compress into a diamond-hard point of focus. She gave a single nod. Very well. She followed him, the sound of her own heels clicking on the polished floor, echoing the pounding in her chest. She was not afraid of him. She was annoyed. And she was, as always, deeply, profoundly tired of this. He led her not to a simple side table, but away from the gate, toward a small, glass-walled room designated for special assistants. It was designed to be isolating. It was designed to make you feel small. As she stepped over the threshold, she saw her flight, her plane, waiting just outside the terminal window. It was an Airbus A330, a marvel of engineering. She knew intimately what it took to get that machine off the ground. She knew its fuel burn rate per hour, the cost of its last refueling stop in Dubai, and the complex hedge fund strategy that protected global airways from spikes in crude oil prices. Officer Thompson gestured to a hard plastic chair. "Wait here, don't use your phone." He and Officer Jenkins stood outside the door, speaking in low tones. Jenkins kept glancing at Ava through the glass, her face pale. Thompson, however, looked satisfied. He looked like a man who had just proven a theory. The room was silent, save for the hum of the HVAC system. It was a perfect cube of sterility. Grey floor, grey walls, and the large glass window that faced the bustling terminal. It was a fishbowl. People walked by, some glancing in with mild curiosity, others with a flicker of pity, most with the practiced indifference of seasoned travellers. Ava sat perfectly still, her leather carry-on at her feet. She did not slump. She did not look worried. She kept her spine straight and her hands folded in her lap. She watched the clock. 10:14 a.m. Boarding would be complete in 15 minutes. Officer Thompson re-entered, this time alone. He was snapping a pair of blue latex gloves onto his hands. The snap-snap of the latex was aggressively loud in the small space. "All right," he said, skipping any pretense of courtesy. "Place your bag on the table." Ava did so. "Is this bag yours, Ma'am?" "Yes," Ava replied. "Did you pack it yourself?" "Yes." "Have you left it unattended at any time?" "No." The liturgy of security, but his tone dripped with accusation. He unzipped the main compartment. Her bag was meticulously organized. A small case for toiletries, a silk pouch for her sleeping mask, a set of noise-cancelling Sony headphones, and her laptop. "Purpose of your trip to Geneva?" he asked, his eyes not on her, but on her belongings. "Business." "What kind of business?" "A meeting." He stopped. He looked up at her. His eyes narrowed. "A meeting, just—" "A meeting?" "Yes," Ava said. "A meeting regarding energy commodities." "Energy commodities," he repeated, drawing the words out as if they were a complex lie. He pulled out her laptop, a high-end Dell XPS. "This yours?" "Yes." "Turn it on." Ava powered it on. The desktop background was a simple, abstract blue pattern. He grunted, seemingly disappointed, and set it aside. He turned his attention to a modest, leather-bound portfolio. "What's this? My work documents?" she said. He zipped it open. Inside were neatly organized papers. The top one was an agenda. OPEC Plus Observer Briefing, Geneva. Thompson scoffed. Actually scoffed. "OPEC? You?" He looked her up and down again. The expensive but understated cashmere, the face clear of makeup, the severe hair. She didn't fit his profile of an international power broker. She didn't look like the white-haired men he saw on the news. "Officer," Ava said, her voice dropping a fraction of a degree, "is there a specific threat you are looking for?" "The threat," Thompson said, enjoying himself, "is what I determine it to be. You're traveling mighty light for a big-shot OPEC meeting. Just this one little bag." "I'm an efficient packer." "Or you're a mule," he muttered, just loud enough for her to hear. Ava's blood went cold. The accusation was so vile, so unprofessional, it momentarily stunned her. He was accusing her of being a drug mule. "Excuse me." "You heard me." He began swabbing every item, every zipper, every lining of her bag for explosive residue. He was rough. He dumped her small toiletry bag onto the stainless steel table. A lipstick rolled off and clattered to the floor. Ava watched it roll. She did not move to pick it up. "Officer," she said, her voice now a blade of ice, "you are detaining me from my flight. You have insinuated I am a criminal. You are now damaging my property. I need your full name and your badge number." Thompson froze, his hand halfway into her bag. He straightened up, a dark flush crawling up his neck. "You're in no position to demand anything," he snapped. "You fit a profile." "What profile exactly?" Ava asked, her gaze unwavering. "A black woman in first class? A woman traveling alone? Or a woman who didn't smile when you stared at her?" "You're being aggressive," he shot back, pointing a gloved finger at her. "That's a red flag. That's my probable cause. You're hostile and you're nervous." "I am not nervous," Ava corrected him. "I am angry. You are abusing your authority." The explosive swab test beeped. Negative. Of course. Thompson's face tightened. He was losing. He had expected her to be scared, to cry, to be intimidated. Her composure was, to him, the ultimate proof of her guilt. "We're not done here," he said. He picked up her work portfolio again, the one with the OPEC agenda. He began to flip through the pages behind it. Thompson was not a sophisticated man. He was a bully who had been given a badge and a small kingdom of linoleum. The documents in Ava's binder were his worst nightmare. They were intelligent. They were dense charts, projections of Brent crude oil futures, logistical maps of shipping lanes, and complex financial derivatives. He didn't understand a single word. "What is this?" he demanded, holding up a page titled Atlantic Corridor Fuel Price Hedging Strategy, Q4. Coded messages? The accusation was so absurd, Ava almost laughed. "That is a financial forecast. Officer, you are now handling proprietary, market-sensitive documents. I suggest you put them down." "Market-sensitive," he mocked. "Right, like you're some Wall Street big shot." "I am a CEO," Ava said simply. This broke him. The quiet confidence, the refusal to be rattled, the expensive clothes, the OPEC meeting, and now the claim of being a CEO. It all coalesced in his small mind into a single blazing conclusion. She was a fraud. A high-class, arrogant fraud. "A CEO?" he laughed. "A COO of what, exactly? Some fake company you printed on a business card?" He dug back into her bag, pulling out her wallet. He found her corporate American Express card. "Ava Williams, CEO, Aura Energy Logistics." "Aura Energy Logistics," he read. "Never heard of it." "I would be surprised if you had," Ava said. "We are a B2B firm. We don't manage gas stations. We manage the acquisition and logistics of bulk aviation fuel for major carriers." Thompson stared at her. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty entered his eyes. He had clearly never considered where the jet fuel for the planes outside came from. But the doubt was quickly replaced by stubborn pride. He couldn't be wrong. He wouldn't be wrong. "So you say," he sneered. "Anyone can get a fancy credit card made. We're going to verify this. We're going to verify you." "How?" Ava asked, glancing at the clock. 10:22 a.m. They were making the final boarding call. "We're going to run your passport. We're going to run your name. We're going to find out what you're really up to." He picked up his radio. "Dispatch, I have a possible 445 here. Suspicious individual. Inconsistent story. Possible forged documents. I'm bringing her to Central." A 445. A suspicious person. He was formally detaining her. She was going to miss her flight. Officer Thompson, Ava said, standing up slowly. You are making a grave mistake. You are not just detaining me. You are interfering with a multi-billion-dollar international contract. The airline you are protecting is my client. Sit down, he shouted, his composure finally cracking. Sit down. You don't make demands here. You don't make threats. I am the law here. He was puffed up, red-faced, vibrating with his own power. He had her. She was his. It was in that moment of chaos that Ava saw him. Through the glass wall, walking briskly toward the gate, flanked by 2 gate agents, was Richard Davenport. Richard Davenport, the Chief Operating Officer of Global Airways, the man she was supposed to meet in Geneva for a preliminary review before the OPEC summit. The man whose airline depended entirely on the contract Thompson was currently thumbing through with his greasy latex gloves. Ava did not shout. She did not bang on the glass. She simply raised her hand and knocked, sharply, twice. Davenport, hearing the sound, glanced over. He saw the glass room. He saw Officer Thompson, red-faced and aggressive, and he saw Ava Williams, standing calmly in the center of the storm, staring directly at him. He stopped dead. His face, which had been set in a mask of hurried importance, drained of all color. Ava, he mouthed through the glass. Richard Davenport was a man who lived by a schedule. His life was a series of meticulously planned, 5-minute intervals. An unscheduled stop was an annoyance. A delay was a crisis. Seeing Ava Williams, his most critical vendor, in a TSA detention room was an apocalypse. He immediately changed course and strode to the door of the room. Officer Thompson, hearing the door handle turn, spun around. "Sir, this is a restricted area. You can't come in here." Richard Davenport, a tall man with a severe face and silver hair, didn't even look at Thompson. His eyes were locked on Ava, his expression a mask of pure, unadulterated panic. "Ava, what in God's name is going on? We're holding the plane for you." "I'm glad to hear it, Richard," Ava said, her voice dry. "I'm being detained. This is Officer Thompson. He believes I am a drug mule, or perhaps a corporate spy carrying coded messages." Thompson, suddenly faced with a white man in a $5,000 suit who clearly knew the detainee, began to stammer. "Sir, this is a matter of airport security. This woman was acting suspicious. She fits a profile. Her story is inconsistent." "Her story?" Richard repeated, his voice dangerously quiet. He finally turned his gaze to Thompson. "What story did she give you?" She claimed to be a CEO, claimed to be going to an OPEC meeting. She has documents." Thompson gestured vaguely at the table, at the scattered, high-level logistical charts. Richard Davenport's eyes followed the gesture. He saw the open binder. He saw the title page, which Thompson had carelessly flipped past. Confidential. Global Airways, Aura Energy Logistics, projected 5-year Atlantic corridor, aviation fuel supply contract, total contract value, $8.4 billion. Richard Davenport looked at the document. He looked at Ava Williams, the CEO of Aura Energy Logistics. He looked at Officer Thompson, who was still wearing the latex gloves he had used to rifle through her belongings. Davenport didn't just get angry. He went perfectly, terrifyingly still. The blood rushed back into his face, turning it a deep, mottled red. "Officer," Davenport said, his voice barely a whisper, "take your hands off that binder." "Sir, I'm just doing my job." "Your job?" Davenport exploded. He ripped his own phone from his pocket. "Do you have any comprehension of what you've just done? Do you know who this is?" Thompson took an involuntary step back. "She's a passenger." "That passenger," Davenport spat, "is Ava Williams. She is the CEO of Aura Energy. She doesn't work for the fuel company, you idiot. She is the fuel company. The contract you are currently contaminating with your hands is the singular agreement that allows Global Airways to operate any flight on the entire East Coast. The plane you are making her miss? It, like every other plane at this airline, flies on her fuel. She manages our $8.4 billion fuel contract. There was a profound, ringing silence. Officer Thompson's entire world seemed to tilt. His face went from red to a sickly, pale white. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Ava watched him, her expression unreadable. She's the... Thompson stammered. She is the woman, Davenport continued, his voice low and vibrating with fury, who is personally responsible for 30% of our airline's operating costs. She is not going to an OPEC meeting. She is a primary consultant at the OPEC meeting, and you pulled her aside because she fit a profile. It was at that moment that Officer Sarah Jenkins, who had been hovering by the door, chose to speak. Her voice was small, but it cut through the tension. He told me to, sir, she said, looking at Davenport. He said she didn't look right for first class. He said he had a feeling about her. There was no random selection. He just picked her. The betrayal from his own partner was the final blow. Thompson looked at Jenkins, his eyes wide with disbelief. He was sinking, and she had just thrown him an anchor. Davenport looked at Jenkins, then at Thompson. The look of pure contempt he gave the man was something to behold. You, Davenport said to Thompson, are finished. The next 60 seconds were a masterclass in corporate panic. Richard Davenport was already on his phone, his thumb flying across the screen. Get me Frank Russo, he snapped into the device. Frank Russo was the head of security for all of Global Airways' JFK operations. I don't care if he's in a meeting. Get him, and get me the TSA station manager. Now. He looked at Ava. Ava, I cannot articulate how sorry I am. We will get you on that plane. I will have it held indefinitely. Richard, Ava said, calmly retrieving her lipstick from the floor and placing it back in her bag. This officer has accused me of being a felon. He has illegally detained me. This is not a customer service issue. This is a civil rights violation. The word, civil rights, landed in the room like a grenade. Thompson, who had been frozen, finally found his voice, but it was a reedy, pathetic whine. I was following procedure. I had reasonable suspicion. She was hostile. I want to see the report you filed, Officer Thompson, Ava said, zipping her leather portfolio. The one you radioed in, the one that outlines your probable cause. I'd like a copy of that. Thompson's blood ran cold. He had logged it. Suspicious individual, 4-5, hostile, inconsistent statements. He had fabricated a report to justify a detention based on his bias. He hadn't just been a bigot, he had been a stupid bigot. He had created a paper trail. The report is internal, he stammered. It's about to be Exhibit A, Ava said flatly. Davenport, still on his phone, barked. Get the Port Authority police down to Gate 22. Now, we have a situation. Things moved fast. Within 2 minutes, the small glass room was suddenly very, very crowded. First came the airline's people. Frank Russo, the airline security head, a harried-looking man in a suit, followed by the first-class gate supervisor, who looked like she was about to cry. Then came the airport's people, a stern-faced woman in a navy blue TSA management uniform. The station manager arrived, flanked by 2 Port Authority police officers. The actual police. The dynamic shifted instantly. This was no longer Thompson's territory. What is going on here? The TSA manager, whose name tag read DIAS, demanded. Davenport stepped forward. "Manager Diaz, I am Richard Davenport, COO of Global Airways. Your officer, Monsieur Thompson, has, for the last 20 minutes, illegally detained and harassed our single most important corporate partner. He did so with no cause, based on his own admission of a feeling. He accused her of being a criminal. He has potentially jeopardized an $8.4 billion contract and violated her civil rights." He pointed to Officer Jenkins. His partner, Officer Jenkins, has confirmed he targeted Ms. Williams for no reason. All eyes, the police, the managers, the airline staff, fell on Officer Mark Thompson. He was shrinking. The puffed-up, authoritative man was gone. In his place was a pale, sweating man who clearly saw his entire life unraveling. He falsified the log," Jenkins added, twisting her hands. "He said she was hostile, but she wasn't. She was just calm. He didn't like that she was calm." Manager Diaz looked at Thompson. Her expression was pure granite. "Thompson, your radio, your badge. Hand them to me, now." "Manager, hand them to me." Slowly, his hands shaking so badly he could barely unclip it, Mark Thompson handed over his badge, the symbol of his tiny kingdom. "Officer Jenkins, you will come with me to Central Ops and give a formal statement," Diaz said. She then looked at the two Port Authority officers. "Please escort Mr. Thompson to the airport holding station. He is suspended, pending a full investigation by us and the Department of Homeland Security." "Investigation?" Thompson squeaked. "You falsified a federal report to justify discrimination," Diaz said, her voice dripping with ice. "Your lucky investigation is all we're starting with. This is New York. You could be facing a lawsuit that will cost you your house." The police officers stepped forward, each taking one of Thompson's arms. He didn't resist. He was utterly broken. As they led him out of the room, he passed Ava. He wouldn't look at her. He just stared at the floor, a picture of pathetic, self-induced ruin. The karma was swift. It was brutal. It was total. "Ms. Williams," Manager Diaz said, turning to Ava. Her demeanor was now one of profound, professional contrition. "On behalf of the Transportation Security Administration, I offer my deepest, most sincere apologies. This is not our standard. This is not what we train. This is an abhorrent failure." "Thank you, Manager Diaz," Ava said. She zipped her carry-on. "I appreciate your prompt handling of the matter." "We will be in touch, of course," Diaz said, clearly understanding this was far from over. Richard Davenport, who had been vibrating with a mixture of rage and sheer, bottom-line terror, gently touched Ava's elbow. "Ava, the plane. We have to go. They've held the jet bridge." "Of course," Ava said. She was escorted from the room like royalty. Davenport held her bag, though she didn't ask him to. The gate agents, who had watched the entire drama unfold, were falling over themselves. "Right this way, Ms. Williams. We are so sorry for the delay, Ms. Williams." She walked past the other passengers in the gate area, who were staring, whispering, and filming on their phones. They had seen a black woman taken into a room by security, and now they were seeing her escorted onto the plane by the airline's COO, while the security officer was led away in disgrace. The story was already writing itself. Ava stepped onto the plane. The flight attendants at the door greeted her with wide, panicked eyes. "Welcome, Ms. Williams. Can I get you anything? Champagne? Water?" "Champagne would be lovely," Ava said. She settled into seat 1A. It was a spacious pod, an oasis of privacy. She stowed her bag, slid off her shoes, and finally, for the first time that morning, took a deep breath. She had won. The immediate battle was over. But the victory felt cold. It felt, as it always did, exhausting. She shouldn't have had to fight. A moment later, Richard Davenport slid into the empty seat opposite her. He was still pale, and his hands were clasped so tightly his knuckles were white. "Ava," he said, his voice low. "First, my apologies are not enough. What you just endured it's indefensible. That man Thompson, he will be fired. I will personally see to it. I will call the head of the TSA myself." "He will be fired," Ava agreed. "But he is not the problem, Richard. He's a symptom." "A symptom?" He felt empowered to do what he did. He looked at me, made a judgment based on my race and my gender, and felt secure that the system would back him up. He was wrong, but only because I happened to hold an $8.4 billion contract over your head. "What?" she asked, her eyes locking on his. "Happens to the black woman in seat 28B, the one who is just a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, who apologizes to her when she's humiliated and misses her flight. Who gets her justice?" Davenport had no answer. He looked down. "You're right, it's a systemic failure." "It is," Ava said, "and it's a liability." The shift in her tone was subtle, but to Richard it was a siren. She had gone from victim to CEO. "Liability. Richard," she said, as the flight attendant poured her a glass of Dom Perignon. "We have a contract, Aura Energy and Global Airways. I'm sure you're familiar with Clause 12B, Section 4, the Operational Integrity Clause." Davenport's blood, which had just returned, drained away again. The Integrity Clause. The clause that states that if either party acts in a way that causes material, reputational, or operational harm to the other, the injured party is entitled to seek damages. That if personnel or agents of Global Airways, and the TSA in this context is an agent of your operational pipeline, interfere with the duties of Aura's key personnel, penalties are incurred. She took a small, sharp sip of her champagne. "Your airline, Richard, just detained my CEO. Your agent accused me of being a drug mule. He did it in a glass box in front of hundreds of people. He delayed my arrival to a critical OPEC summit, where I am negotiating the Q1 price of jet fuel on your behalf. This," she said, "is the definition of operational harm." Davenport was sweating. "Ava, please. It was one man. A rogue agent. Not the airline. He was wearing a uniform in your terminal, stopping your passengers from boarding your plane. He is the airline, until you prove otherwise. You have a systemic problem, Richard. Your system is broken. It allows men like Officer Thompson to flourish." What do you want?" he whispered. "I want you to fix it," Ava said. "I want a full, top-to-bottom review of your security partnership protocols at every major hub. I want a new training module on bias, and I want Aura Energy to review it and approve it. And I want a formal, written report on my desk by the time I get back from Geneva." "Yes, absolutely. Anything." He was desperate. "And the penalties," she added. "Penalties. The clause is clear, Richard. A 1.5% penalty on the next fuel invoice for operational disruption." Davenport did the math in his head. 1.5% of their next monthly fuel bill was millions, tens of millions of dollars. He stared at her, gobsmacked. "Ava, that's incredibly steep. I know exactly what we're talking about," Ava said. "I call it the profiling tax. It's the price of doing business with a company that can't control its own people. It's the price of my humiliation." She looked past him, out the window. The ground crew was pulling the jet bridge away. The plane was finally moving. "Now, if you'll excuse me, Richard," she said, picking up her Sony headphones. "I have an $8.4 billion contract to manage, and you have a long flight to think about how you're going to explain this to your board." He had no response. He just nodded, defeated. He stood up and walked back to his own seat in row 2, a man completely and utterly vanquished. Ava Williams put on her headphones, turned on a playlist of quiet classical music, and closed her eyes. The plane taxied toward the runway, ready to take her to Geneva. The flight was smooth. The airspace over the Atlantic was, as usual, calm. Ava did not sleep, despite the late hour. She worked. She opened the very binder that Thompson had manhandled and began to refine her presentation for the OPEC summit. The numbers, the charts, the cold, hard facts of logistics, they were her sanctuary. They were the one part of the world that did not lie, that did not judge, that did not see her skin color before her intellect. Halfway through the flight, the lead flight attendant approached her pod. "Ms. Williams, I am so sorry to disturb you. Mr. Davenport in 2A is, well, he's not feeling well. He seems to be having some kind of panic attack." Ava paused. "Is he medically unwell, or is he, Clause 12B, unwell?" The flight attendant, a sharp woman in her 50s, gave a small, understanding smile. "I believe it's the latter, ma'am. He's been on the sat phone with your legal department for the last hour. He looks broken." "I see," Ava said. "Please bring him a bottle of water. And perhaps," she added, "a double scotch. Tell him it's from me." The attendant nodded, impressed. "Right away, Ms. Williams." Ava turned back to her work. She felt no pity. Pity was a useless emotion. What she felt was a cold, hard sense of rebalancing. The world was chaotic and biased, but for a few brief moments, you could force it to make sense. You could attach a dollar amount to the injustice. Davenport represented the system, the lazy, comfortable, privileged system that allowed men like Thompson to exist because it was easier to ignore them than to root them out. The system that smiled at her in the boardroom, but allowed its lowest-level employees to treat her like a criminal in the terminal. Today, the system learned that its indifference had a price tag, a very, very high one. When the plane landed in Geneva, Ava was the first one off. A representative from Global Airways' Swiss office was waiting at the jet bridge, holding a sign with her name. He looked as terrified as Davenport. "Miss Williams, welcome to Geneva. I am here to personally escort you through customs and to your car. Your luggage? Oh, you have no luggage. Of course. Right this way. Please let me apologize on behalf of—" "Thank you," Ava cut him off, walking briskly. "Is the car ready?" Yes, of course." As she was escorted into a private S-Class Mercedes, her phone buzzed. It was a text from her general counsel. Davenport caved. They've agreed to the penalty. They're wiring it as a service disruption fee. The bias training review is already on my calendar. He sounds like he's going to cry. Ava typed a simple reply. "Good. Begin the draft for the press release." She looked out the window as the car sped toward the city. The sun was rising over Lake Geneva. It was beautiful. But she wasn't looking at the lake. She was looking at her reflection in the glass. The same face that Officer Thompson had deemed suspicious. The same face that had just cost an airline over $20 million before breakfast. It wasn't a smile on her face. It was a look of grim, absolute resolve. The story didn't end when Ava Williams's flight to Geneva disappeared into the clouds. For the people left in her wake, the real consequences had only just begun. The event at Gate 22 was not an isolated incident. It was a catalyst. It was the pulling of a single thread that would unravel the careers of two men and fundamentally re-engineer the system that had allowed them to fail. The fall of Officer Mark Thompson, Mark Thompson's escort from the glass room, was the last time he would ever wear the TSA uniform. His suspension, confirmed by Manager Diaz before Ava's plane had even reached cruising altitude, was a mere formality. The true dismantling of his life began the next morning. He was ordered to report to the airport's Central Administration Building at 8:00 a.m. He walked through the employee entrance, no badge, no radio, no authority. The other officers, the ones he had shared coffee with, the ones who had laughed at his jokes, wouldn't meet his eye. They knew. The speed at which an institution will sever a limb to save the body is terrifying. Manager Diaz's office was small, windowless, and painted a pale institutional green. Diaz herself sat behind her metal desk, her face a mask of cold necessity. She did not ask him to sit. "Mark," she began, her voice flat. "I've reviewed the preliminary report. I've read Officer Jenkins's sworn statement, and I've spent the last 3 hours on a conference call with our regional director and a representative from the Department of Homeland Security's legal counsel." "Maria, listen," Thompson blurted, his voice reedy. "That woman, I had a gut feeling. I'm trained to follow my gut. It's about see something, say something." "What exactly did you see, Mark?" Diaz interrupted, her eyes narrowing. "Did you see a weapon? Did you see an item on the X-ray?" "No. The report says you saw a black woman in first class. You saw a woman who didn't smile at you. You saw a woman who was calm. Your gut, as you call it, is a finely tuned instrument of personal prejudice. It is not a security tool." "I was following procedure," he insisted, his voice rising in panic. "No," Diaz said, sliding a single piece of paper across the desk. "You were not. You fabricated a 445 report, citing hostility that the video footage directly contradicts. You engaged in a targeted, non-random screening based on appearance. You violated her civil rights, our code of conduct, and frankly, basic human decency. But most of all, from our perspective, you exposed this entire administration to catastrophic liability. You are a vulnerability, Mark, and we do not tolerate vulnerabilities." She pushed the paper closer. "This is your notice of termination, effective immediately." "You're firing me?" he whispered, the reality finally hitting him. "After 9 years. For one mistake." "This wasn't a mistake," Diaz said, standing up, the meeting over. "It was a choice. It was 1,000 small choices you've probably made every day, and this time you just happened to pull aside the one person on this continent who could hold you accountable. You are to be escorted from the premises. Your access codes are revoked. We will mail you your final check." He was escorted out, a man hollowed out, stripped of the only identity that had ever given him a sense of power. But Ava Williams was not finished. Her legal team, from one of New York's most prestigious and feared law firms, moved with the speed of a predator. 2 days later, a process server found Mark Thompson in his small, cluttered apartment in Queens. He was served with a civil lawsuit. It wasn't just against the TSA. It was against Mark Thompson, personally. The suit alleged false imprisonment, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and most damningly, a violation of her rights under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983, deprivation of rights under color of law. The discovery phase was a vivisection. Ava's lawyers, impeccably dressed and armed with the full resources of aura energy, subpoenaed everything. They got his personnel file. It was a map of his biases. They found a pattern of 47 random secondary screenings in the past 6 months alone. 41 of them were people of color. They got the full, high-definition security footage. They didn't just have the clip from the gate, they had the footage from the concourse. They showed in a timeline Thompson tracking Ava from the moment she exited the main security checkpoint, his eyes following her as she browsed a newsstand, his gaze fixed on her as she stood in the priority line. It was not a random selection. It was a hunt. The deposition was the final, brutal end. Thompson, in a cheap suit, sat sweating under the lights of a conference room, facing Ava's lead counsel, a sharp-eyed woman named Jessica Harding. "Mr. Thompson," Harding began, her voice quiet, "please review Exhibit A. This is the security footage from Gate 22. You will note the time stamp. You appear to be staring at Ms. Williams for 1 minute and 12 seconds before she reaches the boarding agent. Is that correct?" "I was assessing the line," Thompson stammered. "You were assessing her," Harding corrected. "Now let's look at Exhibit C. This is the transcript of your radio call. You stated, and I quote, 'Subject is hostile.' Can you please point to the moment in the video, Mr. Thompson, where my client appears hostile? Is it here, when she calmly hands you her passport? Is it here, when she follows you to the room without protest? Or was it perhaps that she simply refused to be intimidated by you?" He had no answer. "Let's move to Exhibit F," Harding continued, relentless. "This is the affidavit of your former partner, Officer Sarah Jenkins. She states, under penalty of perjury, that you told her, 'That one doesn't look right. I'm going to take her.' Did you say that, Mr. Thompson?" I don't recall." "You don't recall," Harding repeated. "You falsified a federal report. You perjured yourself in your initial incident statement, and you targeted a U.S. citizen based on her race, and you did it all while wearing a federal uniform." Thompson lost the lawsuit. The TSA's insurance and legal team handled the case against the agency, settling quickly. But the personal judgment against Thompson was staggering. He was financially obliterated, forced into bankruptcy. His termination was upheld, and he was blacklisted from all federal, state, and even private security jobs. His small kingdom was gone. He eventually found work as a night shift attendant at a self-storage facility in a remote part of New Jersey. A silent man in a small glass booth, guarding nothing but empty, concrete boxes, forever haunted by the face of the woman who had calmly and completely ended his life. The reckoning at Global Airways. While Thompson was facing legal ruin, Richard Davenport was facing a different, more refined kind of execution, a corporate one. He was, as promised, recalled from Geneva. He never even made it to the OPEC summit. He was ordered back to New York on the next available flight. The call came from Robert Harrison, the chairman of the board of Global Airways, a man who viewed the 3% dip in their stock price not as a statistic, but as a personal $480 million insult. The emergency board meeting was not a discussion. It was a sentencing. Davenport stood at the far end of a 40-foot mahogany table. The room on the 50th floor overlooked the city, but it felt like a tomb. "Richard," Chairman Harrison began, his voice like gravel, "you have been with us for 22 years. You have, until now, been a model of efficiency, which is why this catastrophe is so baffling." "Robert, it was a rogue TSA agent," Davenport pleaded, his voice hoarse. He had rehearsed this speech. "It was an external event, entirely out of our—" "Was it?" interrupted Sarah Chen, the board's sharpest member and head of the risk committee. "Was it out of your control when you, our COO, were filmed by passengers being verbally eviscerated by our single most critical vendor? Was it out of your control when you, without consulting this board, authorized a $20 million penalty payment?" "She invoked Clause 12B," Davenport said, desperation creeping in. "I had to mitigate the damage. She was threatening the entire fuel contract." "She didn't have to threaten," Harrison cut in, his voice cold. "She had already won. The damage was done. The press release Aura Energy issued this morning. Have you read it, Richard?" Harrison slid a piece of paper down the table. Systemic vulnerabilities. Security failure. Operational pipeline integrity. She didn't use the word racism once. She didn't have to. She used the language of the market. She told the world that global airways is a bad investment, that we are weak, poorly managed, and have uncontrolled partner agents. She made us look incompetent. You made us look incompetent. Davenport stared at the paper. The profiling tax was far more than $20 million. The reputational damage was incalculable. "Richard," Harrison said, folding his hands, "we had a meeting with Ms. Williams and her legal team this morning via video conference. She was clear. She no longer trusts your operational oversight. She finds your leadership lacking, and frankly, so do we." What does that mean?" "You won't be fired," Harrison said, almost sadly. "Firing you would be an admission of guilt, and we've already paid enough for your mistake. But your name is being removed from the CEO succession list, effective immediately. Your international oversight portfolio is being reassigned to Ms. Chen. You are being demoted." Davenport felt the blood drain from his face. "Demoted? To what?" "You are the new Vice President of Domestic Hub Logistics," Harrison said. "Specifically, you will be overseeing the modernization of our baggage handling systems. We trust you'll find the work grounding." It was a humiliation so profound it was almost artistic. He was being sent to the corporate basement. Weeks later, Richard Davenport sat in a smaller, shabbier office overlooking the tarmac at JFK. Not the sleek international jets, but the rattling luggage carousels and the catering trucks. He was in a mind-numbing meeting about RFID baggage tags. He was a ghost in a suit. At 10:30 a.m., he heard the familiar roar. He looked up through the smudged window, just in time to see Global Airways Flight 112, the Geneva flight, climb into the sky. He knew Ava Williams was likely on it, in seat 1A. He knew she was heading to a meeting he would never again be invited to. He had lost his power, his future, and his dignity, all because a small and hateful man had a feeling, and he, Richard Davenport, had been too weak and too terrified to manage it. The architect of change. For Ava Williams, the event was already in the past. She landed in Geneva, her mind focused. She walked into the OPEC summit, not as a victim, but as the CEO of Aura Energy Logistics. She stood at the lectern, a solitary, powerful figure in a room of oil ministers and energy magnates. "The volatility in the market is not a threat," she said, her voice clear and carrying in the vast hall. "It is a data point. It is an inefficiency we can leverage. Aura Energy's projections show that by rerouting our Atlantic supply chain, we can not only mitigate the risk of Q1 price spikes, but we can create a 4% margin increase." The room was silent. They were hanging on her every word. This was her world. This was her power. The glass box at JFK was a distant, irrelevant memory. When she returned to her New York office, a sprawling, light-filled space overlooking Central Park, her assistant brought in the week's priority mail. Among the financial reports and industry analyses was a single, thick, cream-colored envelope. It bore the seal of the Department of Homeland Security. She opened it. It was not a legal document. It was a handwritten letter from the administrator of the TSA himself. "Dear Ms. Williams, I am writing to offer my deepest, most profound apology for the indefensible actions of our former officer. What you experienced was a failure of our core mission. It was not a mistake. It was a violation, and I am sickened by it. Your company's press release was painful for us to read, but it was, in every respect, accurate. We have systemic vulnerabilities. My office has already terminated the officer responsible. But I know this is not enough. Firing one man does not solve the problem that created him. Ms. Williams, we need to fix this. To that end, we are forming a new civilian oversight committee on bias and professional standards. We need people who have seen the system fail, who understand the stakes, and who have the strength to hold us accountable. We need you. Would you be willing to serve as the committee's first co-chair? Ava read the letter twice. A lawsuit could win her money. A penalty clause could punish a company. But this was a chance to change the rules. She accepted. 3 months later, Ava was in a secure conference room in Washington, D.C. She was at a U-shaped table, sitting next to the TSA administrator. Manager Diaz was there, along with civil rights leaders, aviation security experts, and sociologists. "Good morning," Ava said, addressing the room. "Let's be clear about our purpose. This is not a PR exercise. This is not about sensitivity. This is about security. The officer who detained me wasn't just a bigot. He was a bad officer. He ignored actual threats to pursue a fantasy in his head. Bias is a security failure. It makes us less safe. It creates blind spots. Our job is to eliminate those blind spots." Her committee worked for 6 months. They rewrote the training modules. They implemented data-driven checks to monitor random screenings and flag officers with biased patterns. And Ava's first non-negotiable directive was implemented. The glass detention rooms were to be eliminated from all U.S. airports. "We will not put our citizens in a fishbowl of shame," she had declared. "Interviews will be conducted in private, professional offices with the passengers' rights clearly posted on the wall." A year later, Ava Williams was walking through JFK Terminal 4. She was, as always, in her understated cashmere, holding her single carry-on. She approached the checkpoint. The new signage, which her committee had designed, clearly stated a passenger bill of rights and a bias-free screening policy. The TSA agent, a young professional woman, scanned her passport. "Good morning, Miss Williams. We have you confirmed for seat 1A. Ava paused. The agent had recognized her name, not as a celebrity, but as the co-chair of the Oversight Committee. She was a known quantity. She was part of the system's new immune response. "Good morning," Ava replied, a small, genuine smile touching her lips. She walked through the terminal. She passed the space where the glass room had once been. It was now a family assistance area with soft chairs, charging stations, and a small play area for children. She proceeded to her gate and boarded her flight. As she settled into seat 1A, the lead flight attendant for Global Airways approached. "Ms. Williams, a pleasure to have you. Mr. Davenport's replacement, Ms. Chen, has already called ahead to confirm your car service in Geneva." Ava nodded, stowing her bag. The karma had come, not as a single, fiery explosion, but as a slow, structural, and permanent ice. It had bankrupted the man who'd wronged her. It had humiliated the man who had failed to stop it. And it had given her the power to tear down the very room they had tried to lock her in. She didn't just win. She had rewritten the very foundation on which the battle was fought. She put on her headphones, opened her laptop, and got back to work. The story of Ava Williams is a shocking reminder that the most dangerous biases are often hidden behind a badge or a uniform. She was lucky. She had an $8 billion contract as her shield. But as she asked, what about the person in seat 28B? What about the millions who don't have that power, who are humiliated and have no recourse? This injustice happens every single day in places of power. The only way to fight a broken system is to expose it. Officer Thompson's career was ended, not just by his hate, but by the light that was shined on it. If you believe that no one should be judged by their appearance, and that power must always be held accountable, then like this video and share it with everyone you know. Let's send a message. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories where karma delivers the justice that the world so desperately needs.